I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even close my eyes. The tea my sister brought me, her first kind gesture in years, had turned my body into a prison. My fingers wouldn't twitch. My legs were dead weight. But my mind was fully awake and my ears caught every sound. That's how I heard her footsteps stop at my door. That's how I heard her leave it ajar, not closed, not open, just enough for someone to walk through. That's how I heard her whisper to a man in the hallway, "Just make it look natural." The door creaked wider. Heavy footsteps crossed my bedroom floor. A stranger knelt beside my bed, pressed 2 fingers to my throat, and muttered words that turned my blood to ice. But here's what I couldn't understand, what kept me clinging to consciousness when everything in me wanted to surrender. He didn't hurt me. He checked if I was alive, and when he stood up, his hands were shaking. Who was this man? Why did my sister need my death to look natural, and what had my father asked her to do? My name is April Martinez. I'm 36 years old, and I work as a senior data analyst for a consulting firm in Virginia. On paper, my life looks like success, stable career, my own apartment, money, and savings. But none of my family knows any of this because I learned long ago that sharing my accomplishments only invited silence or comparison to my younger sister. Let me take you back to the week before that terrible night. In my family, silence was currency. The quieter you were, the more loyal you appeared. My mother never raised her voice, never disagreed with my father, never once defended me when he compared me unfavorably to Lena. I learned early to stay quiet about my achievements, my feelings, my questions. Silence felt safe. Speaking up felt like betrayal. That's what 36 years in that house had taught me. A week before I came home, I received a strange letter from the IRS. It claimed I had failed to report $85,000 in income from the previous year. Money I had never seen, never earned, never knew existed. I assumed it was a mistake, maybe identity theft. I mentioned it to my mother during a phone call, planning to sort it out after I helped her recover from knee surgery. I didn't notice how her voice went tight. I didn't hear the pause before she changed the subject. I was too busy packing my suitcase to pay attention. I should have listened more carefully. Growing up, I was the afterthought. Lena, 4 years younger, was the golden child from birth. My father, Richard, made no secret of his preference. "Lena takes after me," he would announce at family dinners. Then his eyes would slide to me, and his voice would flatten, "April. I don't know who she takes after." My mother, Gloria, never corrected him. She would sit with her hands folded, her gaze fixed on her plate, her expression holding something I could never quite name. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. I spent years trying to earn the warmth she gave so freely to Lena. I never succeeded. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't have known, was that the favoritism wasn't random. It was strategic. My father needed one daughter isolated and voiceless. I was chosen for that role before I could walk. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandmother, Eleanor. She died 15 years ago, but before she passed, she pressed a small tin box into my hands with urgent instructions. "Don't open this in front of your father. When you're truly on your own, you'll understand." Then she had gripped my hand with surprising strength and added words that haunted me for years. "Trust no one in that house, April, not even your mother, especially not your mother." I thought it was the rambling of a dying woman. I kept that box in my Virginia apartment never opened, tucked away like a memento I couldn't quite discard. I didn't realize my grandmother had seen something none of them wanted me to see. When I arrived at my parents' house, the familiar pattern resumed. I cooked, I cleaned, I managed my mother's medication and helped her to the bathroom and changed her bandages. Lena appeared twice in 5 days both times, with her phone out, snapping photos for Instagram. "Taking care of Mama," her caption read. She stayed 20 minutes each visit. I said nothing. Silence was loyalty. Silence was survival. On the 5th evening, Lena came to my room with a cup of herbal tea. "You've been working so hard," she said softly. "I made this for you." I should have questioned it. Lena had never done anything kind for me without an audience. But I was exhausted, and some desperate part of me wanted to believe my sister cared. I drank the tea. 30 minutes later, my body stopped obeying me. I collapsed onto my bed, paralyzed, but conscious, staring at the door to my room. It was ajar. Not closed, not fully open, just slightly open, as if inviting something terrible to walk through. And through that crack, I saw Lena whispering to a man I couldn't quite recognize, "Just do what Dad asked." The door creaked wider, and the man stepped into my room. I could not turn my head to see him clearly. I could only lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to his footsteps cross the hardwood floor until he stood directly beside my bed. He knelt down. I felt 2 fingers press against my throat, checking my pulse. His touch was professional, clinical, like someone trained to assess vital signs. He leaned closer, and I caught the sound of his breathing. It was uneven, shallow, nervous. "She's still breathing," he muttered more to himself than anyone else. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. The dosage was too strong. My heart would have raced if my body had allowed it. Dosage. They had given me something deliberately, and it had gone wrong. I was supposed to be unconscious, maybe completely unresponsive, but instead I was trapped in this horrible space between aware of everything, unable to react to any of it. The man stood up and stepped back from my bed. Through the edges of my vision, I could make out his silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. He ran his fingers through his hair and let out a long, shaky breath. His hands were trembling. This was not the behavior of someone who wanted to hurt me. This was a man caught in something he did not fully understand, and he was scared. Lena appeared in the doorway. Her shadow fell across my bed as she stepped closer. "Is she out?" Her voice was sharp and patient. "She's breathing," the man replied, "but barely." "Lena, this is too much. You said she just needed to sleep for a while. You didn't say anything about keep your voice down." Lena moved further into the room. I heard her heels click against the floor as she stopped somewhere near the foot of my bed. "Dad said she's been stealing from them for years. Did you know that my own sister taking thousands of dollars from our parents while pretending to be the responsible one, the one who supposedly cares?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Stealing, I had never taken a single dollar from my parents. I had been financially independent since I left home at 22. I paid for my own apartment, my own car, my own life. I had never asked them for anything. But Lena believed it. I could hear it in her voice, the righteous anger, the conviction. Someone had told her this lie, and she had swallowed it whole. After Friday, Lena continued, her tone dropping to something cold and determined. "She won't be able to touch their money anymore. The court will make sure of that. And maybe then Dad will finally see the truth. I'm the one who protected this family, not her. I've always been the one who actually cared." The man shifted uncomfortably. "This still feels like it's going too far. What if something goes wrong? What if she'll be fine." Lena cut him off. "Just do what you're supposed to do and stop asking questions." They left my room. The door remained open, that same crack of light, spilling in from the hallway. My thoughts drifted to that door as the minutes passed. Still ajar. Still that gap where anything could enter. How easy it would have been for Lena to close it. A closed door might have given me protection, might have bought me time, might have been the smallest gesture of sisterly care, but she had left it open. She wanted someone to walk through. She wanted whatever was about to happen. That half-open door was not carelessness or oversight. It was permission. It was invitation. It was my sister saying without words that I deserved whatever came next. The drug pulled at the edges of my consciousness. My thoughts grew heavy, fragmented. And in that space between waking and darkness, I found myself remembering. My grandmother's funeral. 15 years ago. The church had been filled with white lilies, her favorite. Family members dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs and spoke about what a wonderful woman Eleanor had been. But my father did not cry. I remembered watching him during the service, waiting for some sign of grief, some crack in his stoic expression. Instead, when the casket closed for the final time, his shoulders relaxed. He took a deep breath like someone releasing tension he had carried for too long. At the time, I told myself I was imagining things. People grieve differently. But then another memory surfaced, one I had buried for years. Weeks before my grandmother died, I had visited her in the hospital. She had been agitated that day, gripping my hand with surprising strength despite her weakness. "Your father has been meeting with lawyers," she had whispered urgently. "I overheard him telling your mother that my house would solve everything once I was out of the picture. I don't know exactly what he's planning, but I know him, April. He'll try to take what I'm leaving you." I had dismissed it then. The medication, I told myself. The fear of dying making her paranoid. I had patted her hand and told her not to worry, that everything would be fine. I had been trained in silence, trained not to question, trained to believe that my family, despite their coldness, would never truly harm me. And so when my grandmother tried to warn me, when she tried to break through decades of conditioning with the truth, I refused to listen. Now, lying paralyzed in my childhood bedroom, while my sister plotted something terrible just beyond that half-open door, I finally understood. My grandmother had seen what none of us wanted to see, and I had let her down. Hours passed. The paralysis began to fade slowly, starting with my fingers. I could twitch them slightly, then curl them into my palm. The sensation spread to my arms and legs, like blood returning to a sleeping limb, painful prickling, but welcome. I was regaining control. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Lena's voice murmured something I could not make out. I forced myself to remain perfectly still, keeping my breathing slow and shallow. The door opened wider, and I felt her presence in the room. She stood over me for a long moment watching. I did not move. I did not flinch. Finally, she left. When I was certain she was gone, I opened my eyes. The room was dim, lit only by the gray light of approaching dawn. I turned my head slowly, every movement an effort, and saw something on the floor beside my bed. A small white card. It took all my remaining strength to reach down and pick it up. My fingers were clumsy, weak, but I managed to bring it close enough to read in the faint light. Marcus Webb, private investigator. A private investigator. In my bedroom, in the middle of the night. The pieces did not fit together. Lena was jealous, yes. Lena wanted our father's approval. But hiring a PI, that required planning resources a larger purpose. This was not just sibling rivalry spiraling out of control. Something bigger was happening. Someone else was pulling strings. I tucked the card beneath my pillow just as the sound of a car engine broke through the morning quiet. Tires on gravel. A door slamming. Heavy footsteps crossing the porch and entering the house. My father's voice cut through the silence, sharp, commanding, utterly in control. Is it done? A pause. Then Lena's response, eager and nervous. Yes, Dad. She's been out all night. Good. The hearing is Friday. Make sure she stays sedated until then. His tone was cold, matter-of-fact, as if discussing a business transaction. And remember, she's been unstable for years. Erratic. Irresponsible. When the time comes, everyone will believe it. My father's words echoed through the house, and in that moment, everything I thought I understood about my family shattered. This was not Lena acting alone out of jealousy. This was not sibling rivalry gone too far. My father was orchestrating something, and I had 4 days to figure out what. I waited until the house fell silent. The paralysis had faded enough for me to move, though my muscles ached, and my head pounded with every heartbeat. I found my shoes, my purse, my car keys. I crept down the hallway past closed doors and sleeping betrayers and slipped out into the cold morning air. I drove for 20 minutes before I felt safe enough to stop. A 24-hour convenience store appeared on my right, its fluorescent lights harsh against the gray dawn. I went inside and paid cash for a prepaid phone, the kind that could not be traced back to me. If my father was monitoring my movements, if he had access to my phone records, I could not risk using my own device. My hands trembled as I dialed the number on Marcus Webb's card. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. Webb? This is April Martinez Batig, I said. You were in my bedroom last night. You checked my pulse. I need to know why. There was a long pause. When Marcus spoke again, all traces of sleepiness had vanished. You're coherent. You can talk. You're not supposed to be functional right now. How is that possible? The drug wore off. I heard everything my sister, my father, all of it. Now tell me what's going on, or I'm calling the police. Don't, he said quickly. Not yet. Listen to me. I wasn't there to hurt you. I didn't know what your sister was planning. I was hired by your father 3 weeks ago. He wanted me to investigate you, to gather evidence proving you were mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. He said he needed documentation for a court case. My stomach turned. What kind of court case? Guardianship. He's trying to have you declared legally incompetent so he can take control of your finances and your decisions. Marcus paused. But April, here's the thing. I couldn't find any evidence against you. Your credit is excellent. Your employment history is spotless. You have no criminal record, no history of mental illness, nothing. You're one of the most stable people I've ever investigated. If you couldn't find anything, I asked slowly. Why were you at my parents' house last night? I went there to warn you. Something felt wrong about the whole situation. Your father was too eager, too insistent. But when I arrived, your sister intercepted me. She introduced me to your mother as a friend who knows first aid. She said you had suddenly fallen ill and asked me to check on you. His voice dropped. I didn't know about the drugging until I saw you lying there barely breathing. By then it was too late to stop anything. I leaned against my car, trying to process what he was telling me. Last night I heard Lena say something. She told you to make it look natural. What did that mean? Marcus exhaled heavily. Your father's original plan wasn't to knock you out with one dose. He wanted Lena to give you small amounts of sedative over your entire stay, enough to make you appear confused, disoriented, maybe even paranoid. By Friday's hearing, there would be multiple witnesses to your erratic behavior. Your whole family would testify that you had been acting strangely for days. He paused. Lena gave you too much at once. She almost killed you by accident. That's why I was called in to check if you were still breathing and help figure out how to cover up what looked like an overdose. When I realized you were alive, I told them to let you sleep it off. I thought that would be the end of it. But it's not the end of it, I said. My father mentioned a hearing on Friday. What is he planning? He's been planning this for years, April. Let me show you what I found. We agreed to meet at a diner an hour away from my parents' house. Marcus arrived with a folder thick with documents. He spread them across the table between our untouched cups of coffee, and what I saw made me feel like the ground had opened beneath my feet. Bank statements, transaction records, withdrawal slips. Over $287,000 had been taken from my parents' retirement accounts in the past 3 years. Every single withdrawal bore my signature, except I had never signed any of them. The signatures are forged, Marcus said. Good forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. The money didn't go to you. It went to accounts controlled by your father. Failed investments mostly. He's been bleeding their retirement dry and making it look like you were the one stealing. And Lena, your father told her you were the thief. He showed her these same documents and convinced her you had been secretly draining their accounts for years. She genuinely believes she's protecting your parents. Marcus shook his head. The sedative she gave you? Your father told her it was just something mild to help you rest while they sorted out the family finances. She didn't know it would paralyze you. She didn't know any of it. So Lena was a pawn, a willing one, desperate for our father's approval, but a pawn nonetheless. She had drugged me believing she was doing the right thing. It did not excuse her actions, but it explained them. There's more, Marcus said. You mentioned an IRS letter, something about unreported income. I nodded. $85,000. Income I never earned. That's the trigger. Marcus leaned forward. Your father has been using your identity for over a decade. Tax fraud, credit applications, business loans. He even took out a $150,000 mortgage in your name in 2019. The IRS letter was the first crack in his system. If you investigated, you'd discover everything. So he filed for guardianship 2 weeks ago as a preemptive strike. 2 weeks ago, I repeated, but I never received any notification about a hearing. Because he listed your parents' address as your residence on the petition. The court notice went there. He intercepted it. You were never supposed to know until it was too late. Marcus held my gaze. If you're declared incompetent by Friday, you lose all legal standing to fight back. You become his permanent shield for every crime he's ever committed. That afternoon, I drove to my Virginia apartment. The tin box my grandmother had given me 15 years ago was exactly where I had left it, tucked in the back of my closet. I carried it to my kitchen table and sat there for a long moment just looking at it. Then I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a folded document. The letter was from my grandmother, her familiar handwriting slightly shaky from the illness that had been taking her life. My dear April, it read, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and your father has done what I always feared he would. I saw him meeting with lawyers in the weeks before I got sick. I overheard him telling your mother that my house would solve everything once I was out of the picture. I don't know exactly what he's planning, but I know him. He will try to take what I'm leaving you. So I made 2 copies of my will, one with my lawyer, one hidden here. If the lawyer's copy has disappeared, this is your proof. Your father made you invisible your whole life, April. He taught you that silence was loyalty, that questioning was betrayal. But I see you. I've always seen you. You are the strongest one in this family, strong enough to survive them, strong enough to find this truth. Trust no one in that house. Not even your mother. She loves you, but her fear is stronger than her love. It always has been. You deserve better than what they gave you. Now go prove it. The document was her original will. It left her house worth $400,000 specifically to me. Marcus studied the will carefully. The original probate fraud was 15 years ago, technically outside the statute of limitations, but your father has been filing false tax returns using proceeds from that stolen inheritance every year since. Each return resets the clock. And that 2019 loan using stolen funds as collateral, that's recent enough to prosecute everything. It all connects. He looked at me with something like admiration mixed with urgency. Your father spent 15 years building you into the perfect scapegoat. He made everyone believe you were unstable, so when this moment came, no one would question it. But April, the hearing is Friday. That's 4 days. If you don't prove your competency and expose him before, then you lose everything. Your money, your freedom, your identity, your entire life. He wins. 4 days. That was all I had to save my own life. Marcus and I worked through every remaining hour gathering documents, consulting attorneys, building a case that would either free me or destroy everything I had left. By Thursday evening, I had hired a lawyer of my own, a woman named Sandra Chen, who specialized in fraud cases and looked at my father's scheme with the cold fury of someone who had seen this kind of betrayal before. Friday morning, I walked into the courthouse wearing a navy blue suit I had bought years ago for job interviews. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I had spent 36 years being invisible in my own family. Today they would finally see me. My father was already seated at the petitioner's table when I entered the courtroom. The shock on his face when he saw me was worth every sleepless hour of the past 4 days. He had expected me to still be sedated in Pennsylvania, confused and helpless. He had expected to win by default. Instead, I took my place at the respondent's table with my attorney beside me and met his eyes without flinching. The competency evaluation took less than an hour. I answered every question clearly and correctly. I recited my social security number, my address, my employer, my bank account details. I explained my monthly expenses, my savings, my retirement contributions. The evaluator made notes and nodded her expression professionally, neutral, but her eyes betraying confusion about why this case had been filed at all. Then my attorney stood and presented our evidence. She explained that the guardianship petition listed my parents' Pennsylvania address as my residence, not my actual home in Virginia. The court notification had been sent to the wrong address deliberately, a serious procedural violation. She pointed out factual errors throughout the petition regarding my employment history, my living situation, and my mental health. None of it matched reality. The judge's face darkened as she reviewed the documents. She looked at my father with an expression I had never seen anyone direct at him, suspicion bordering on contempt. "This petition is dismissed," she announced. "Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation into the irregularities in how this petition was filed. Mr. Martinez, I strongly suggest you retain criminal counsel. You may need it." My father's face turned gray. He had spent 36 years teaching me to be silent, to be invisible, to accept whatever treatment the family decided I deserved. That was his greatest miscalculation. He had taught me to survive alone, and surviving alone had made me stronger than he ever imagined. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked with Marcus and my attorney to build an airtight case. We gathered security footage from my parents' house, showing Lena entering my room multiple times, searching through my documents and belongings. We obtained fingerprint analysis matching both my father and Lena to the forged signatures on bank withdrawal slips. We traced every dollar from my parents' retirement accounts to investment accounts controlled by my father investments that had failed spectacularly, leaving him desperate for money to cover his losses. The authenticated will from my grandmother proved the probate fraud. The 2019 loan documents proved identity theft. Medical records from my brief hospitalization after the drugging showed exactly what sedative had been in my system and in what quantity. And the recorded phone conversations obtained legally through Marcus's continued investigation captured my father discussing how to manage me, how to keep me under control, how to ensure I never discovered what he had done. Every piece connected to form a complete picture of 15 years of systematic fraud. My father had stolen my inheritance, destroyed my credit, and tried to steal my freedom. He had done it all while teaching me that I was worth less than my sister, that my voice did not matter, that silence was the only loyalty I could offer. When we had everything we needed, I returned to my parents' house one final time. I did not call ahead. I did not warn them. I found them in the living room with their attorney discussing what they called damage control. Lena sat in the corner, her face pale and drawn. They all looked up when I walked in, and for a moment no one spoke. I placed a thick folder on the coffee table. Transaction records. The authenticated will. Loan documents. A digital recorder. Dad, Lena, I think it's time we talked honestly, maybe for the first time ever. I looked at my father directly. You taught me that silence was love, that good daughters don't ask questions, that keeping the peace was more important than telling the truth. I believed that for 36 years, and it almost cost me everything. Their attorney picked up the folder and began reading. His face changed, first confusion, then alarm, then something approaching fear. He stood up abruptly and excused himself without explanation. The door closed behind him with a sound like a verdict. My father straightened in his chair, attempting to regain control. You've always been unstable, April. This fantasy you've constructed proves everything I've been saying about you. Then you won't mind if I play these recordings for the police, I replied calmly. They're already on their way. I called them 2 hours ago. His bluff collapsed. I watched the calculation in his eyes shift from confidence to desperation to something ugly and cornered. Lena broke first. Her voice cracked as tears spilled down her cheeks. Dad told me you were stealing from them. He showed me bank statements with your signature. He said you never loved this family, that you were just waiting for them to die so you could take everything. Before I could respond, she continued, her words tumbling out between sobs. Do you know what it's like to spend your whole life trying to earn love that was never real? Every time Dad praised me, it wasn't because he loved me. It was because I was useful. I was his little soldier, and I didn't even know I was in a war. She laughed bitterly through her tears. You were the lucky one, April. He ignored you. He didn't break you from the inside the way he broke me. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I had not expected. A woman who had been shaped into a weapon and was only now realizing she had been aimed at the wrong target her entire life. We were both his victims, I said quietly. The difference is I survived on my own. You became his accomplice. That's the part you have to live with now. My father turned on Lena with a viciousness I had never witnessed before. You stupid girl. You couldn't even handle a simple task. All you had to do was keep her sedated for a few days, and you couldn't manage even that. His mask fell completely. This was who he had always been, a man who saw his own children as tools to be used and discarded when they failed to serve his purposes. A sound from the hallway made us all turn. My mother emerged from the shadows, trembling, her face wet with tears. I knew, April, she whispered. I knew everything, for years. Your father threatened me, said he'd leave me with nothing if I ever told you about the will. I was terrified of being alone. So I hid your grandmother's letter in that tin box, hoping someday you'd find it on your own, and I wouldn't have to be the one to betray him. She covered her face with her hands. I was a coward. I looked at my mother with something beyond anger, a profound, exhausted understanding of who she was and who she had always been. Yes, Mom, you were. You taught me that silence was loyalty, and your silence nearly got me killed. Police sirens cut through the evening air. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Officers entered the house, and I stepped aside to let them pass. They handcuffed my father first. He protested loudly about family misunderstandings and personal disputes, but the officers ignored him. They had seen the evidence. Then they read Lena her rights for her role in the conspiracy. She went quietly, tears streaming down her face. But my eyes remained fixed on my mother. I watched her realize that 40 years of silence had not protected anyone. It had only ensured that when the destruction finally came, it would be complete. 6 months passed before the legal system delivered its final verdicts. 6 months of depositions and hearings and evidence reviews. 6 months of watching my family's carefully constructed lies collapse under the weight of documented truth. My father's sentencing took place on a cold Tuesday morning in federal court. Richard Martinez stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled. Even now, facing overwhelming evidence, he refused to accept responsibility. "My daughter fabricated all of this," he declared. "She's always been jealous, always been unstable. This family would have been fine without her." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Martinez, the evidence against you is overwhelming. You spent 15 years systematically exploiting your own daughter while ensuring she had no voice to defend herself. You stole her inheritance. You stole her identity. You tried to steal her freedom. The only thing unstable in this courtroom is your moral character. 12 years in federal prison. No possibility of early parole." I watched them lead my father away in handcuffs. He did not look at me. He had never really seen me, not as a daughter, not as a person, only as a tool. I felt no triumph, only the quiet, profound relief of finally being believed. After a lifetime of being told I was wrong, I was worthless, I was nothing. A courtroom full of strangers had looked at the evidence and seen the truth. Lena's sentencing came 2 weeks later. She received 3 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and mandatory psychological counseling. The court acknowledged she had been manipulated, but held her accountable for her choices. She had never questioned, never verified, never hesitated when asked to drug her own sister. She found me outside the courthouse, her makeup ruined from crying. I was so desperate for him to love me. I never stopped to ask why he needed me to hate you. I'm so sorry, April. I looked at my sister for a long moment. I believe you're sorry, Lena. I even believe you didn't fully understand what you were doing. But you chose not to understand. You chose to believe I was a thief without ever asking me. You chose to put something in my drink without knowing what it was. Those were your choices. Being manipulated doesn't erase them. I paused. I hope you find out who you are without Dad's approval to chase. But that's a journey you take alone, not with me. I walked away without embracing her. There was no reconciliation, just the truth. With my father imprisoned and all assets frozen, my mother lost everything. The family home was sold. The proceeds went toward my restitution. She was left with almost nothing. She came to me a month later. "I have nowhere to go. Could I stay with you? Just until I figure things out?" My answer came without hesitation. "No, Mom. You chose silence for 36 years. You watched him diminish me, use me, steal from me, and you said nothing. You knew about Grandma's will. You knew what he was doing with my identity, and your solution was to hide a letter in a box and hope I'd find it someday." I took a breath. "You're 64 years old, and you've never once stood on your own. That's not my fault, and it's not my responsibility to fix. You need to learn who you are without someone else making your choices." She moved into a small one-bedroom apartment. For the first time in over 40 years, she had to manage her own life. 3 months later, I heard she had gotten a part-time job at a library. She was learning to pay her own bills, cook her own meals. When I visited her apartment, I noticed something I had never seen in our family home: photos of me on her bookshelf. My graduation. My first job. Pictures she must have kept hidden for years. "I was always proud of you," she said quietly. "I just wasn't brave enough to show it." "Then be brave now, Mom. It's not too late." The probate fraud was officially overturned. The court ordered full restitution of $400,000. After liquidating everything I recovered, $340,000. The remaining $60,000 was placed as a lien against any future assets my father might acquire. For weeks, I did not know what to do with the money. Part of me wanted to give it all away, but my therapist said something that changed my perspective. Enjoying what's rightfully yours isn't greed, April. It's justice. Your grandmother wanted you to have a good life, not just survive. So I made a decision. I kept $150,000 for myself, enough to buy a small cottage by a quiet lake, enough to feel secure for the first time in my life. The remaining $190,000 went into establishing the Eleanor Martinez Foundation, a nonprofit providing legal resources for women escaping financial abuse. The motto, "Your worth was never theirs to decide." My grandmother did not just want me to be strong. She wanted me to be happy. And for the first time, I gave myself permission to be both. 6 months after the trial, my mother visited the cottage. I allowed her inside for 1 cup of tea, but the boundaries remained clear. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "I should have said that decades ago." "Yes, you should have." Her eyes filled with tears. "Can you ever forgive me?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't know yet. Maybe someday. But forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. Healing doesn't require forgetting. I can release the anger without inviting you back into my daily life." I set down my teacup. "I'm choosing to heal. That's about me, not about you." As she prepared to leave, I walked her to the door. We stood at the threshold together, that space between inside and outside, past and future. "I'm not closing this door completely, Mom," I said quietly. "But I'm not leaving it wide open either. You'll have to earn your way back in, one honest conversation at a time." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I understand." I watched her walk to her car, then gently closed the door. Not all the way, but almost. A crack of light remained, just enough for possibility. That night, standing alone in my cottage, I thought about doors, how they can protect you or expose you. My sister left my door ajar that night, expecting death to enter. Instead, truth walked in. And truth, unlike death, doesn't stay quiet. It demands to be heard. I think about my grandmother now. She knew I would survive this. She knew I would find the truth. And she knew I would do something meaningful with it. My grandmother was right. I am the strongest one in this family. Not because I never fell, but because when I finally understood why I kept falling, I stopped letting them push me down. Now I stand in my own home, on my own ground, living my own life, a life I built with my own hands from the wreckage they made of my childhood. I don't need my father's approval. I don't need my mother's protection. I don't need my sister's acceptance. I don't need anyone to see my value anymore. I see it myself. And that finally, completely, irreversibly is enough. April's story carries lessons that every woman needs to hear. Your worth is not determined by how your family treats you. Sometimes the people who should love us the most become the ones who hurt us the deepest. But their failure to see your value does not make you worthless. It makes them blind. If you grew up in a home where silence was treated as loyalty, where asking questions was seen as betrayal, know this: that was never love. Love does not require you to stay quiet while you are being harmed. Love does not demand that you sacrifice yourself to keep the peace. And walking away from people who use you is not abandonment. It is survival. Financial abuse is real, and it often comes from the people we trust most. If something feels wrong about how a family member handles money, trust your instincts. Ask questions. Investigate. The discomfort of confrontation is far less painful than discovering years later that your identity, your credit, and your future were stolen while you stayed silent. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to build a life where you decide who gets access to your peace. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel so you never miss another powerful story like this one. We share new stories every week about women who found their strength in the darkest moments. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who hurt you? What gave you the courage to finally speak up? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the one that helps someone else find their voice today.